So it was meant to be a big experiment, particularly in terms of the financial reforms in China. But so far, it has not yet made really anything, any like breakthrough in financial reforms. But China has a lot of the Chinese entrepreneurs and people, I think, elsewhere have high hopes that Shanghai Free Trade Zone really can experiment with some new policy, give Shanghai more freedom to try things that China right now, particularly in the financial system and also in the legal system, that still not willing or not able to do elsewhere. Part of the reason, China is a huge country, so the central government very reluctant or hesitant to implement a policy without some kind of experimentation first. So this gave the Chinese government freedom to try things in a controlled area, and if it succeeds, then they can, replicate elsewhere. And if something goes wrong, they can correct it and then, try a new version, to make it work better. So we really have a lot of Chinese scholars and entrepreneurs really have high hopes that this experiment in Shanghai can go forward, quicker and faster. There is still a huge room for growth in China. In the first decade of reform in the 80s and in the 90s, Chinese economy grew at about 10%. So in the past few years, the growth rate came down to about 7.5. So, I mean, that's still quite an impressive rate of growth. But I don't think China, but I don't think there's some a limit for growth in China. Since China is still quite a poor country, I'll give you one example. I grew up in Hubei province, that's in the south central part of China. In terms of the population is about the same size as Italy, about 60 million. But the size of the economy of Hubei province is about 1/6 of Italy. So, and there is a huge difference within China between the coast area and the inland area. And the gap, just very hard for people to imagine the gap between the coast area and inland area in China. So if you go to places like Beijing, Shanghai, I mean, they are not so different really from New York City or San Francisco. But if you go into inland areas, they're very poor. So from that regard, there's huge room for rapid growth in China. So as long as the Chinese government can implement more reforms, or as long as the people in inland area can get more economic freedom, the kind of freedom that their counterparts in coast areas now enjoy, I mean, I can easily see more rapid growth in the Chinese economy in the years to come. That's a very good question, and I think that's the kind of question in the mind of Xi Jinping, Li Keqiang, and other Chinese leaders, and also the Chinese scholars as well. If we only look at the economy, I mean, it's quite competitive. But if we look at the political system, say look at the rule of law, in that regard, China still has a long way to go. So I guess China now has to take some steps in reforming its political system, give more freedom to the Chinese people. But in our book, we talked about the lack of free market for ideas in China. And that is something that, of course, how to create and sustain a free market for ideas is not easy. But China has to do something there to give more freedom to the Chinese people. Otherwise, I mean, today everyone recognizes new ideas, technology innovation. That's really the driving force of economic growth. So China's economy cannot possibly grow in a sustainable way without being creative and innovative.